Captain Harris, we need you up front now. The voice of flight attendant Megan Doyle cracked over the intercom, slicing through the hum of a full aircraft. 142 passengers froze mid-breath. Heads turned, phones lifted, every eye focused on row 2, seat B. There sat a man who didn't belong, at least that's what Megan believed. Samuel Brooks, a quiet black janitor in plain work clothes, remained perfectly still. He hadn't moved for 10 minutes, not when Megan demanded his boarding pass, not when she accused him of fraud, not even when whispers rippled through first class about how a man like him could possibly afford such a seat. Samuel finally raised his head. His eyes were calm, but there was something unnerving in the way they fixed on her. Megan's voice wavered as she announced again, "The captain's on his way." Samuel's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "Good." I was waiting for him. A silence, heavier than turbulence, dropped over the cabin. Phones tilted higher, recording every frame. The businessman in 1A muttered impatiently. A teenager 3 rows back whispered to her friend, "This is about to go viral." In the corner, 17-year-old Aiden Cruz pressed "Go Live" on his phone. Within seconds, thousands of viewers flooded his stream, comments flying across the screen. "What's happening? Why's security coming? Who is that guy?" Samuel didn't shift in his seat. His hands rested lightly on his lap, his posture as if he had all the time in the world. The contradiction was staggering. A man accused of trespassing, yet radiating the composure of someone entirely in control. Megan stepped back, her chest tight, every instinct screaming that something about this man was off. "Sir, you're holding up this entire flight," she said, forcing authority into her voice. "When the captain arrives, you will be removed." Samuel tilted his wrist. The old watch he wore ticked audibly, a relic from another life. He glanced at it, then looked up again, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried through the air like a verdict. "In less than 10 minutes, this plane will not leave the ground." Not until the truth does, passengers gasped. A few recoiled. Was that a threat or a promise? Every lens stayed trained on the janitor, who suddenly seemed far less ordinary. If you've ever wondered how an invisible man could bring an entire system to its knees, don't look away. This story will change the way you see justice. The captain had been summoned, but the real storm was already breaking. Flight attendant Megan Doyle stood rigid in the aisle, her neatly pressed uniform suddenly feeling too tight. She had handled unruly passengers before, but never one who sat so calmly, as if the entire plane belonged to him. "Sir, you still haven't shown proper identification," she repeated, her voice sharper now. Seat 2B was filled by Samuel Brooks, a janitor in plain, work-worn clothes. His posture was steady, his eyes unreadable. He didn't fidget, didn't plead, didn't even blink. Passengers leaned into the aisle. The businessman in 1A tapped his watch, sighing loudly. The couple in 3C whispered to each other, their words drowned out by the rising hum of curiosity. Phones were raised higher, cameras capturing every angle. Megan felt their eyes too, hundreds of them, pressing down on her authority. She had to be right. She had to prove she wasn't losing control. From row 6, 17-year-old Aiden Cruz balanced his phone in one hand, his live stream already exploding with comments. "Yo, check this out," he whispered into his mic. "Guy in janitor clothes trying to take first class. Flight attendants freaking out. This is crazy." He tilted the camera towards Samuel, then back to himself. Notifications flooded his screen. "What's happening? Show us the guy. Is this discrimination or fraud?" Thousands of strangers were suddenly passengers too, riding the tension from afar. Meanwhile, Maya Thompson, the youngest flight attendant on board, stood a few steps behind Megan. Her hands clutched the beverage cart, knuckles white. She was new, still learning the ropes, still desperate not to make mistakes. Yet something in Samuel's stillness unsettled her. She didn't see defiance. She saw patience, a quiet certainty. "Sir," Megan pressed on, her tone rising, "this is your last chance. If you can't produce proper proof of your ticket, we'll have no choice but to remove you." Without a word, Samuel reached into his pocket. The air in the cabin seemed to contract. Phone steadied, recording. Megan's breath caught. For one sharp second, security training flashed through her mind. Sudden movement, hidden threat. But Samuel only pulled out a slip of paper, a boarding pass. Smoothly, deliberately, he unfolded it and handed it over. Megan snatched it, eyes scanning quickly. "Flight 2479, Seat 2B, First Class, departure 2:15 p.m. Every detail matched." Passengers shifted uncomfortably. A murmur rippled down the cabin. The businessman leaned closer, frowning. Someone whispered, "Looks legit." On Aiden's stream, comments blew up. "Wait, it's real? Did she just accuse him for nothing?" Maya's chest loosened. Relief washed through her, but only for a second. Megan didn't hand the pass back. Instead, her brows furrowed deeper. She tilted the paper toward the light, searching for flaws. "This doesn't prove anything," she said, voice cracking just slightly. "Anyone can print one of these. Sir, how exactly did you pay for this seat?" Samuel remained silent. The faint tick of his old watch filled the pause. He looked at Megan, then at the cameras aimed at him, then back down at his folded hands. His composure never wavered. The passengers weren't silent anymore. A woman in 4D muttered, "He showed the pass, didn't he?" Another voice, "Why's she pushing it?" Phones kept recording. Aiden grinned into his live stream. "She's not backing down." This is about to explode. His viewer count ticked higher, 10,000, then 12. Maya stepped forward, her lips parting as if to speak, but she froze when Megan shot her a sharp glance. The warning was clear, stay out of it. She swallowed her words, retreating behind the cart. The pressure mounted. Megan knew the cabin was slipping away from her. Every camera was evidence. Every second of hesitation was a mark against her authority. She couldn't let this man, this janitor, unravel her. "Sir," she said, forcing steel into her voice, "boarding passes can be forged. Do you really expect me to believe a janitor belongs in first class?" Gasps erupted. Passengers sat back, stunned. Phones shook in trembling hands. And through it all, Samuel Brooks never flinched. The sharp footsteps came first. Then the tall figure of Captain Derek Harris appeared at the front of the cabin, his gold-striped shoulders cutting through the aisle like a warning. 25 years of flying had taught him one truth. Hesitation in the face of a disruptive passenger could collapse authority in seconds. "Jessica," he corrected himself. "Megan, what's going on here?" His voice was steady, commanding. Megan straightened, relief flickering across her face. "Captain, this passenger has refused to provide sufficient ID. He presented a boarding pass, but I suspect it's fraudulent. He's been evasive, uncooperative, and—" She lowered her voice, but loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "He doesn't fit the profile of a first-class traveler." A ripple of unease moved through the seats. Phones lifted higher, capturing the captain's frown as he studied the man in 2B. Samuel Brooks sat as he had from the beginning, calm, unflinching. His hands folded neatly in his lap, his eyes lifted toward Harris without fear. "Sir," Harris said, voice formal now, "I need to see further identification. A driver's license, a credit card, anything that verifies this boarding pass." For a long beat, Samuel didn't move. The hum of the engines vibrated faintly underfoot, but the cabin felt like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. Then, with measured precision, Samuel reached into his jacket. Passengers tensed. Megan's breath caught. Harris's shoulders stiffened, bracing for the unexpected. But Samuel only withdrew a leather wallet, worn but elegant. He opened it slowly and slid out a card. The matte black surface gleamed under the cabin lights. The words were unmistakable. American Express Centurion. Gasps rippled across the rows. Someone whispered, "That's the black card." Another hissed, "You can't even apply for that. They invite you." Megan's face paled, but she didn't yield. "That could be stolen." Anybody could carry a card like that if they found the right wallet. The businessman in 1A turned in his seat, eyes narrowed. The woman in 3D raised her phone, higher, whispering to her live stream. This is insane. He's showing proof, and they still don't believe him. In row 4, Linda Park, a composed woman in her early 40s, adjusted her glasses. She had been silent until now, scribbling notes in the margin of a legal pad balanced on her lap. She knew the tone of discrimination when she heard it. Every word Megan spoke, every hesitation in Harris's voice, she recorded it all. Meanwhile, Aiden's livestream numbers surged. 50,000 viewers now. Comments scrolled like wildfire. "He showed the card. They're still accusing him? This is racism." Harris turned the card in his hand, his brow furrowing. He had seen many passengers, many cards, but this one carried weight. Membership required not just wealth, but status beyond ordinary means. Still, Megan's eyes pleaded with him to act, to enforce order. "Mr. Brooks," Harris said carefully, "this card is significant, but you must understand, we have procedures. These seats cost nearly $1,000. I need to know how you obtained yours." Samuel's response was not loud, but it cut through the air. At 6:43 this morning, paid in full, the specificity made Harris pause. Most passengers barely remembered when they booked, much less the exact minute. The words struck like a coded warning. "I know exactly what I'm doing. 10 minutes to scheduled departure." The gate agent's announcement crackled faintly over the intercom. "Final boarding call." Tension strangled the cabin. Megan leaned in, her voice trembling but defiant. "Captain, we can't delay." This situation is making other passengers uncomfortable. Indeed, the businessman in 1A tapped his watch louder now, muttering about connections. The couple in 2C whispered furiously. Cameras caught it all. Linda's pen didn't stop moving. Her legal instinct told her this was no longer a customer service issue. It was becoming a liability case. Harris looked at Samuel again. The janitor's plain clothes, the old watch ticking softly, contrasted sharply with the elite card resting in the captain's hand. Nothing aligned, and yet everything did. "Sir," Harris said finally, "until this is clarified, I'll have to ask you to step off the plane." Voluntarily, Samuel's gaze lifted, calm but unyielding. "No." The word rang out like a gavel. Phones shook as passengers captured the defiance. Livestream comments exploded. "He said no! This is about to blow up." The countdown had begun. 10 minutes left, and the flight was balanced on the edge of a single word. The cabin was no longer a quiet stage. It had become an arena, with every passenger an unwilling spectator, and every phone a spotlight. On Aiden Cruz's livestream, the comments had turned into a roar. The hashtag number sign, discrimination in the air, flashed across thousands of screens, strangers worldwide glued to the unfolding drama. Viewers demanded answers. Why is the janitor still being questioned? Why isn't the plane moving? Inside the cabin, pressure was rising just as quickly. The man in 1A finally had enough. He was middle-aged, wealthy-looking, with a Rolex gleaming on his wrist, and a voice trained to command attention. He turned in his seat and raised it above the murmur of the crowd. "Captain, I paid good money for this seat," he barked. "I have a connection in Phoenix." I did not spend nearly $1,000 to sit here while this nonsense plays out. Do your job and get us moving." The words fueled the tension, slicing through the fragile balance. Heads nodded in agreement. Other first-class passengers shifted, some muttering openly, others shaking their heads at Samuel. Megan latched onto the complaint like a lifeline. "You see, Captain," she said quickly, "other passengers are upset. This man has caused a disruption for nearly half an hour. It's not just me, it's everyone." Harris's jaw clenched. He glanced back at Samuel, who remained motionless, his eyes fixed ahead, a calmness so deliberate it seemed to mock the storm around him. The businessman in 1A tapped his watch again, harder this time. "I expect action, Captain, or I'll be demanding refunds." Phones captured every word, every gesture, the impatience of privilege fueling the fire. And then Megan, voice cracking under pressure, but louder than before, turned back towards Samuel. "Let's stop pretending. You don't belong here. People like you never do." The sentence echoed through the cabin like a slap. Gasps broke out instantly. A woman in 3C covered her mouth. Someone muttered, "Did she really just say that?" Every phone zoomed in, microphones picking up the words with brutal clarity. On Aiden's stream, comments exploded in all caps. "She said it. She really said it. This is racism." Viewer count surged past 70,000. Linda Park's pen stopped mid-sentence. She looked up sharply, her expression hardened, the lawyer in her recognizing exactly what had just been handed to Samuel. Undeniable evidence. Maya Thompson, still gripping the beverage cart, went pale. Her lips parted as if she might intervene, but fear clamped down on her throat. She watched Samuel instead, silently pleading for him to respond, to shatter the suffocating silence. But Samuel didn't flinch. He let the words hang, let them settle into every corner of the cabin, let them be etched into 100 recording devices. His gaze moved slowly from Megan to Harris, calm and deliberate, as if daring them to deny what had just been said. Harris shifted uncomfortably. His authority had been tested before, but never like this. He had trusted Megan's judgment for years. Yet what she had just uttered was dangerous, not just morally, but legally. The businessman in 1A, who had been so quick to demand action, now sat stiff, lips pressed tight, realizing his complaint had just become part of something far larger than a delayed flight. Phones continued to record. The hum of the aircraft was drowned by the digital storm, now raging outside its walls. Number sign discrimination. In the Air trended globally. News outlets pinged Aiden's livestream for permission to rebroadcast. Megan felt the weight of her own words crashing down, but pride and panic pushed her further. "Well, are we all just supposed to ignore this? He's making everyone uncomfortable." "Captain, we can't wait any longer." Harris stared at Samuel, then at the cameras, then at Megan. His voice was low, almost uncertain. "Ma'am, do you realize what you just said?" Samuel's silence was louder than any outburst. The sharp hiss of the cabin door broke the silence. 2 uniformed security officers stepped in, their presence filling the aisle with authority that even the captain's stripes couldn't match. Passengers leaned back instinctively, phones snapping into place, recording every move. "Captain Harris," one officer said firmly, "we were told of a disruptive passenger." Megan nearly leapt forward. "Yes, right here, seat 2B. He refuses to comply, refuses to leave. He's holding up the flight." All eyes swung towards Samuel Brooks, still seated, still composed. The janitor looked almost out of place in his plain clothes among tailored suits and luxury handbags. But the stillness in his face, the deliberate calm in his posture, unsettled the cabin more than any outburst could have. The taller officer stepped closer, resting a hand near his restraints. "Sir, stand up slowly." "You're coming with us. Samuel didn't move. He lifted his head, eyes steady on the officer. Then his words landed like stones in the quiet cabin. "Are you familiar with Federal Aviation Regulation 91.11? The officer blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "FAR 91.11, Samuel repeated, his voice calm, unwavering. "Interference with the duties of a crew member. It applies both ways. Crew abusing their authority are just as liable as passengers who disrupt flights." A ripple shot through the passengers. Phones zoomed in. Whispers surged. Even the businessman in 1A, who had demanded Samuel's removal minutes ago, sat straighter, his curiosity piqued. Captain Harris froze. The words dug at something buried in his years of training. He knew the regulation, every captain did. He had quoted it to passengers in the past, the final hammer when someone crossed the line, but never had it been turned back toward him. Megan flushed, her voice sharp but shaky. "Don't listen to him, Captain. He's twisting the law. He doesn't belong here and he's using jargon to confuse us." But the certainty in her tone was gone. Samuel leaned back slightly, his old watch ticking in the silence. 8 minutes to departure. You can make a lawful decision, or a mistake you'll remember for the rest of your career. The countdown pierced through Harris's mind. 8 minutes until ground control started asking questions. 8 minutes until social media turned this from an uncomfortable incident into a full-scale scandal. Maya Thompson felt her chest tighten. She had been frozen in silence, torn between loyalty to her senior colleague and the gnawing sense that Samuel wasn't lying. She had heard the tremor in Megan's accusations, seen the steadiness in Samuel's eyes. Her gaze locked on him now, silently pleading for reassurance she couldn't give herself. Samuel met her eyes briefly, just a flicker, but enough. His calm seemed to say, "You know the truth, don't be afraid of it." The shorter officer tapped his radio, impatient. "Captain, we don't have time for games. Do we remove him or not?" Harris's throat tightened. 25 years in the air, countless flights, countless confrontations, but never one like this. His instincts screamed to protect order, to support his crew, but the weight of those cameras, the precision of Samuel's words, and the echo of Regulation 91.11 pressed against him like gravity. A passenger whispered, "He knows the law better than they do." Another muttered, "This is going viral." Aiden's livestream counter ticked upward. 90,000 viewers now. Comments exploding. "He cited the law. They can't touch him." Megan's desperation cracked. "Captain, if you don't act now, we'll lose control of the entire cabin." Harris looked at her, then at Samuel, then at the waiting officers. The seconds dripped away, each louder than the engines themselves. 8 minutes to departure, and the janitor in seat 2B had turned resistance into power. Samuel's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried to the farthest row as if the cabin itself wanted everyone to hear. "In less than 10 minutes, he said evenly, "this plane will not leave the ground." Gasps erupted instantly. A woman in 3C clutched her pearls. Someone in row 5 muttered, "Did he just threaten the flight?" Phones jerked upward, zooming in on Samuel's face, capturing every syllable. The taller security officer stiffened. "Captain, you heard him." "That's a direct threat." His hand moved toward the restraints at his belt. "Wait!" Harris snapped, holding up a hand. But even his voice cracked under the pressure. Megan seized the moment, eyes flashing triumph. "You see? I told you, he's dangerous. He's threatening the entire flight. Get him out of here before something worse happens." Her words ignited the cabin. Murmurs swelled into anxious chatter. The businessman in 1A shook his head angrily. "I paid to avoid chaos like this. Remove him now, Captain, or I'll call corporate myself." A teenager in 4D whispered to her phone, "Oh my God, this is crazy. He just said the plane won't take off. This guy's going to jail." On Aiden Cruz's live stream, the numbers spiked past 50,000 viewers. Comments scrolled faster than his eyes could follow. "He just threatened them." No, he didn't. He's exposing something. Replay that line. Replay it. Discrimination in the air is trending. CNN is picking it up. Aiden's grin faltered as he realized this wasn't just content anymore. He angled the phone towards Samuel, his voice hushed but urgent. "The world's watching, man. Whatever happens next, it's all live." Samuel didn't respond. His gaze stayed fixed on Harris, calm and steady, as if he had already calculated every outcome. "Mr. Zabrooks," Harris said, struggling to keep authority in his tone, "explain yourself. Did you just threaten this aircraft?" Samuel's answer was deliberate. "I threatened nothing. I stated a fact. You will not leave this ground until the truth is addressed." The phrasing twisted through the air like smoke, not a threat, a promise. A line drawn so precisely, it left Harris uncertain whether to breathe easier or harder. Maya Thompson's hands trembled on the beverage cart. She wanted to scream that she believed him, that his eyes didn't carry malice but conviction. Instead, she whispered under her breath, "He's not lying." But no one heard. The shorter officer growled, "Captain, this is stalling. Regulations say remove him." But Harris hesitated. The words, Federal Aviation Regulation 91.11, still clanged in his mind. Samuel wasn't some reckless passenger shouting nonsense. He spoke like a man who knew the system from the inside. Passengers were split. Some demanded his removal. Others murmured about discrimination. Every word, every angle was recorded. The cabin was no longer just a flight. It was a trial broadcast to the world. Megan's face burned with desperation. "Captain, if you don't act now, we'll lose control completely." But Harris's eyes lingered on Samuel. The janitor's plain clothes, his ticking watch, his steady composure, none of it fit the profile of a man who panicked under pressure. Instead, he looked like someone waiting for inevitable proof to arrive. The gate agent's voice echoed faintly through the intercom. "Final boarding call. Doors will close in 8 minutes. 8 minutes." The countdown Samuel had warned them about. A hush settled, heavy with fear and anticipation. Phones recorded the moment like it was history in the making. And Samuel Brooks, sitting silently in 2B, had just shifted the balance of power. The cabin was suffocating with tension. 8 minutes left, and every passenger felt it ticking down like a bomb. Then Harris's radio crackled to life. "Captain Harris, this is operations. Social media is exploding. You have 90,000 people watching a live stream from inside your aircraft. Handle this quietly and handle it fast." Harris's throat tightened. 90,000? That was more eyes than he'd faced in his entire career. His hand gripped the radio harder, sweat dampening his palm. Megan pounced. "You hear that, Captain? Corporate wants this dealt with. That means removing him before this gets worse. We don't need more delays, but..." Before Harris could answer, Samuel Brooks moved. Slowly, deliberately, he reached down to the floor beside his seat. Passengers stiffened, phones zoomed in, officers tensed. His hand closed on a black leather briefcase. He lifted it onto his lap with a calmness that only deepened the unease. "Sir, keep your hands where I can see them," the taller officer barked, voice tight. Samuel looked up, unflinching. "You wanted identification. Let me provide something better." He flicked the locks open. The metallic snap echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Gasps rippled. Megan stepped back, her face pale. Inside, Samuel revealed a folder, thick, embossed, stamped with the unmistakable seal of a federal agency. The bold letters across the cover froze Harris where he stood. Passengers leaned forward, squinting, recording. Phones captured every frame. Samuel lifted the folder slowly, his voice steady. Federal documentation. I advise you to read before you act. Harris took it with trembling hands. His eyes swept across the top page. His blood ran cold. Advisory Inspector, National Transportation Safety Board, the header read, and below it, the name, Samuel Brooks. The silence in the cabin shattered. A woman in 4A gasped audibly. Aiden's livestream counter rocketed, comments exploding in disbelief. He's not just a janitor, he works for the government. Megan staggered back, shaking her head violently. No, that can't be real. He's lying. He forged that too. Linda Park finally spoke, her voice cutting through the panic like a blade. That's a federal seal, Captain. Forging it would be a felony. I think you know what that means? All eyes shot back to Harris. His face had drained of color. He had trusted Megan, leaned on her certainty, but the papers in his hand told a different story. Samuel remained seated, his tone sharp but controlled. You asked how I paid for this seat. You questioned if I belonged here. Now you have your answer. I belong here because I oversee the very safety of flights like this, and in the last 30 minutes, your crew has violated more procedures than I can count. The businessman in 1A, who had been so vocal earlier, now stared in stunned silence. The couple in 2C whispered frantically, realizing the incident had just turned into something much larger than an argument over a seat. Maya's heart pounded. She gripped the cart tighter, eyes fixed on Samuel with awe. The quiet man who had sat invisible moments ago was suddenly revealed as someone with unimaginable authority. Aiden whispered into his stream, his voice trembling. Oh my God! He's NTSB. He can shut down this whole flight. His viewer count surged past 100,000. Megan tried again, desperation cracking her voice. Captain, don't fall for this. He's manipulating us. Look at him. He's a janitor. This doesn't make sense. Samuel's gaze cut to her, calm but piercing. What doesn't make sense is why you assumed I didn't belong here. Not my boarding pass, not my card, me. You assumed I didn't belong because of how I look. Phones caught every word. Hashtags lit up. Hashtag justice in the air. Hashtag Samuel Brooks. Harris lowered the folder slowly, his voice shaking. Mr. Brooks, if this is true, Samuel interrupted softly, firmly. It is true. And you're out of time. 7 minutes left. Make your choice. The weight of those words pressed against Harris harder than gravity. The countdown was no longer about departure. It was about truth. And Samuel Brooks had just revealed he was more than a passenger. He was the man who could bring the entire plane, and everyone on it, to a halt. Captain Harris's radio buzzed again, louder, sharper this time. Captain, this is operations. We're monitoring. Your crew has reported a disruptive passenger. Security clearance approved. Proceed with removal. The words twisted the air tighter. Corporate was watching, but they weren't backing Samuel. They were backing Harris. Megan exhaled like she'd just won. You heard that, Captain. They want him off. Now passengers stirred. A wave of murmurs rolled down the cabin. Phones caught every reaction. The businessman in 1A leaned back, smirking, convinced the ordeal was about to end. But Samuel Brooks didn't move. His briefcase sat open, the federal documents still visible. His voice was calm, steady. That's your choice? Remove a federal safety inspector on live video in front of 100,000 people? That's the order you want to follow? The taller officer didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, hand on his restraints. Sir, stand up. You're leaving this plane. Gasps rippled. The woman in 3D whispered, They're really going to drag him out? Samuel lifted his chin, eyes locked on Harris. If you do this, Captain, You'll answer not just to the FAA, but to the Department of Justice. Megan barked, voice shrill with desperation. Stop threatening us. He's bluffing, Captain. Look at him. He's playing you. Before Harris could reply, Linda Park rose from her seat. Her calm, razor-sharp voice sliced through the panic. Enough. If you touch him, you've just committed a federal crime. Obstruction of an NTSB investigator in the course of duty. I don't think I need to remind you what that carries. Years in prison. All eyes swung to her. Megan's mouth fell open. Who are you? Linda flipped her notepad shut, her gaze unyielding. An attorney. And I've documented every word spoken on this flight. You already have a viral discrimination case on your hands. If you lay a hand on him, it becomes criminal. Phones zoomed in. Aiden whispered to his live stream, She's a lawyer. Oh man, this just flipped again. His viewer count surged past 120,000. Comments exploded. They can't touch him now. This is insane. Southwest is finished. The shorter officer hesitated, glancing nervously at Harris. Captain? Harris's jaw tightened. Sweat dripped down his temple. Corporate's voice still rang in his ear. Remove the passenger. Yet his gut twisted. Federal seal. Lawyer's warning. Cameras everywhere. Megan pressed harder, her tone cracking. You're losing control, Captain. If you don't act, he wins. Everyone sees you as weak. Harris stared at Samuel again. The janitor turned inspector sat motionless, gaze unwavering. Not a man scrambling for cover. A man waiting for the truth to catch up. And then, faint but clear, another voice broke the silence. Maya Thompson. Her hands shook as she gripped the cart, her eyes shimmering with tears. She whispered, almost too soft to hear, but the cabin caught it. He's telling the truth. The words fell like a stone into water. Ripples spread instantly. Passengers shifted. Phones zoomed. The businessman in 1A looked startled. Megan spun toward her. What did you just say? Maya's voice cracked, but she didn't look away from Samuel. He's not lying. I can feel it. He doesn't sound like a threat. He sounds like someone who knows exactly what he's talking about. The younger officer muttered under his breath, This is a mess. Harris's pulse hammered in his ears. Corporate wanted order. Megan wanted removal, but the cameras wanted justice, and the cabin wanted answers. 7 minutes to departure, and the janitor in seat 2B had just gained his first ally. The cabin trembled with tension. 7 minutes left, and the air felt like it might snap in half. Harris's radio crackled again, Corporate's voice sharp and unrelenting. Captain Harris, remove the passenger. End this now. Megan's eyes gleamed. Do it. End this circus. But Samuel Brooks moved first. With a calm precision that only heightened the unease, he reached into his briefcase again. Cameras zoomed in. Every phone in first class followed the movement as if the truth itself were about to be pulled from that leather case. He withdrew another folder, thicker this time, stamped with the same federal seal. He set it on the tray table, flipped it open, and turned a page toward the captain. This isn't about me, Samuel said, voice low but cutting. This is about your pilot. The words froze Harris in place. What are you implying? Samuel tapped the document with a steady finger. Your pre-flight safety inspection, signed off less than an hour ago. But according to these records, Captain Harris, you never completed it. Gasps tore through the cabin. Megan's jaw dropped. That's ridiculous. He's flown for 25 years. Samuel cut her off, louder now, his voice carrying across the rows. This is not an opinion. It's fact. The inspection log was forged. The aircraft's auxiliary systems weren't checked. The documentation is a lie, and the signature at the bottom. It's yours, phones shook as passengers strained to capture the page in Samuel's hand. On Aiden Cruz's livestream, Viewer numbers surged past 80,000, comments exploding. The captain forged safety checks. If that's true, they're all in danger. Oh my God, this isn't just discrimination, it's corruption. Harris's throat went dry. That's confidential paperwork. How did you— I'm an inspector, Samuel snapped. I have access to everything, and I have a duty to the public. You think this was about me sitting in first class? Number, this was about whether your passengers are safe. And right now, they are not. Maya covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. She whispered again, louder this time. He's telling the truth. Linda Park rose once more, her voice precise, merciless. Captain, if that document is genuine, and it looks genuine to me, you're not just facing a PR crisis, you're facing federal charges. Megan looked around wildly, desperate for someone to back her, but the passengers weren't on her side anymore. The businessman in 1A sat frozen, shock plastered across his face. The woman in 3D whispered, "He saved us!" The taller officer stepped back, unease flashing across his features. Captain, if this is real, we can't remove him. We need to call this in. The shorter officer muttered, "We'd be arresting the wrong man." Harris's hands shook as he scanned the page. The lines of text, the timestamp, the signature, all damning. His chest constricted. 25 years of flying, his reputation, his authority, it all began to unravel in front of 100,000 strangers watching live. Samuel leaned back in his seat, voice softer now, but no less lethal. 5 minutes to scheduled departure. You can drag me off this plane and face criminal charges for assaulting an NTSB investigator, or you can face the truth of your own negligence. The silence that followed was deafening. The hum of the engines, the shuffle of passengers, the click of cameras, every sound seemed amplified under the weight of the revelation. On Aiden's live stream, a flood of comments filled the screen. Ground the plane now. Fire the pilot. This is history. Harris closed his eyes briefly, the reality pressing down on him. His entire career, his authority, his future, hanging by a single sheet of paper, Samuel Brooks had just exposed to the world. And the countdown marched on. Samuel Brooks rose slightly from his seat, his voice calm yet commanding, filling every corner of the cabin. "This aircraft," he declared, "is officially grounded." The words detonated like thunder. Gasps spread through first class, then rolled down to economy. The passengers stared at him as if the plane had suddenly tilted. Phones zoomed in, recording every syllable. Captain Harris's face went crimson. "You don't have the authority to say that. I am the captain of this flight. I decide whether this plane takes off." Samuel didn't flinch. "And I am the federal inspector assigned to monitor compliance. Your forged safety log is evidence enough. This aircraft is not leaving the ground until further notice." The taller security officer stepped forward, tension in every movement. "Captain, what do you want us to do?" "Restrain him!" Harris barked. "Now!" The officers reached for their cuffs, but passengers erupted in protest. "He just showed you proof!" A woman in row 3 shouted. "You're arresting the wrong man!" Phones swiveled, comments exploded online. "He grounded the plane! Is this real? Fire the captain! Protect the inspector!" Megan Doyle's voice cut above the noise, sharp and desperate. "Don't listen to him. He's twisting documents, manipulating all of you. He's nothing but a janitor pretending to be something else." Samuel reached into his folder again, holding up another page. "Passenger incident reports. Captain Harris, this isn't the first time you've cut corners. 17 flights over the past 2 years. 15 of those involved passengers of color removed from premium cabins under your authorization." The words slammed into the cabin like a verdict. Murmurs turned to outrage. 17? someone whispered. 15 people of color? Megan paled, her words stumbling. That doesn't mean anything. Coincidences happen. Linda Park rose to her feet, eyes blazing. Coincidences don't come in patterns that clear. Captain Harris, you are facing a federal investigation. Phone swung to Harris. His jaw tightened, his hands clenching. His entire career, 25 years in the sky, was slipping through his fingers in front of 100,000 live viewers. And then another phone went live. Not from Aiden this time. Maya Thompson, her hands trembling, had raised her device. She didn't speak, didn't announce herself, just quietly turned her camera toward Samuel, capturing his every word, every document. Her live stream lit up instantly. Thousands joined within seconds. A second feed now circulated across social media, corroborating the first. Viewers shouted online, 2 streams, it's verified, he's the real deal. Samuel's voice cut through the chaos, steady as stone. You can deny me, Captain. You can call me a fraud, but every document I show, every regulation I cite, is being watched by the public in real time. You can't erase this. You can't silence this. This is bigger than you, bigger than me. This is about the safety of every passenger who boards your planes. Harris slammed his fist against the cockpit door. This is mutiny, he shouted. This man is hijacking authority from the captain. But even the officers hesitated. The taller one lowered his cuffs, his voice uncertain. Sir, if he's who he says he is, we can't touch him. Not without risking federal charges, the shorter officer nodded reluctantly. We need confirmation from headquarters. This is... Above us, Megan spun, eyes wild, her voice cracking. You're letting him destroy us. Can't you see? He's going to ruin everything. But her panic only drew more stares, more suspicion. The passengers didn't see order in her words anymore. They saw desperation. Samuel sat back down, folding his hands, his old watch ticking softly. 4 minutes left. The choice is simple. Either this aircraft stays grounded under my authority, or you drag me out and prove to the world exactly how broken your system is. The silence that followed was suffocating. Phones recorded. Viewers climbed to 150,000 across 2 feeds. Social media erupted, grounded. The inspector just grounded the flight. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted. It wasn't Captain Harris controlling the cabin anymore. It was the janitor in seat 2B, the man no one believed belonged there, who now held the fate of Flight 2479 in his hands. The cabin was still electric, but Samuel Brooks sat back slowly, folding the folder shut. His hands rested on it, steady, though his chest rose with a deeper breath than before. The ticking of his old watch filled the silence between gasps and murmurs. A battered silver piece, the kind no luxury shop would sell. The second hand swept forward, stubborn, defiant. Maya's camera stayed on him, but her eyes weren't behind the phone anymore. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Why do you look so calm?" Samuel glanced down at the watch, his lips pressed together before he answered, voice low. "Because I've been here before." Megan scoffed, her voice sharp, cutting through. "What's that supposed to mean? You've staged this. You're not calm, you're rehearsed." Samuel didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the scratched face of the watch, his thumb brushing against its worn edge. And then, almost like the walls of the cabin melted, his gaze drifted far away. For a moment, the passengers saw it too. A hangar, bright lights, the smell of fuel and steel, a younger Samuel in a crisp shirt, blueprints under his arm, speaking with fire in his voice. "Safety isn't a suggestion," his voice echoed. "If you cut costs on inspections, someone will pay for it in blood." Another voice, smooth, corporate, dismissive. "You're idealistic, Brooks. The board doesn't want delays. Sign the clearance. He refused, and days later, the phone call came. A trembling voice on the line. "There's been an accident. Your wife was on that flight." The flash of wreckage, smoke rising against a red sky. His wife's notebook, poetry scribbled in delicate ink, found in the debris. The memory sliced through him even now. His hand tightened on the watch, the only thing he'd kept from her. Passengers watched as the silence in Samuel's face deepened, the stillness carrying a weight none of them could name. Linda's voice broke it gently, steady but probing. That watch, it was hers, wasn't it? Samuel finally looked up, his eyes sharper now, cutting into hers. "She gave it to me the morning she died. Said time was the one thing we never truly owned, and then an airline stole it from us." The words punched through the cabin, harder than any accusation. Maya lowered her phone slightly, tears spilling over her cheeks. That's why you're here now." Samuel nodded once. "I tried to fight from the inside. I tried to expose them. They buried me instead, took my career, my voice, so I became invisible, a janitor no one would question, a man no one would notice." He let the silence breathe. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, their cameras trembling. This wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was grief, raw and unmasked. Megan's voice faltered, brittle. "You expect us to believe this tragedy tale? Convenient timing, don't you think?" Samuel's eyes snapped to her. For the first time, his voice carried heat. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to lose everything so you could dismiss me with one word? My wife is in the ground because people like you cared more about appearances than safety." Megan flinched. The words hit harder than the documents had. The businessman in 1A, who had stayed smug and detached, now lowered his gaze. His phone slipped from his hand, resting in his lap. Aiden's live stream captured it all, comments flooding in. "This isn't just about discrimination. This is about justice. He lost his wife. My God, I'm crying. How is this real?" Samuel's hand eased back over the watch, the faint ticking cutting through the heavy silence. His voice softened again, almost breaking. "I could have stayed invisible forever, but invisible men don't change the world. They just clean up the pieces left behind." 5 minutes ticked down to 4. The storm was coming back, but for a fleeting moment, the cabin wasn't watching an inspector. They were watching a man who had lost everything and still stood. The intercom crackled, sharp and urgent. "Captain Harris, this is headquarters. Hold your position. Executive leadership is joining the call." Harris froze. His stomach dropped. Executive leadership? That level didn't weigh in on routine flights. Something far larger was unfolding. The cabin screens flickered one by one until the front monitor lit up with the image of a boardroom. Rows of men and women in suits, their expressions grave, eyes locked directly into the cabin. Passengers gasped. Phones shot upward. Aiden Cruz's live stream counter surged, tipping past 120,000 viewers. Comments exploded. "The boardroom is live! This is insane!" A gray-haired man at the head of the table leaned forward, his voice measured but cold. "Captain Harris, Ms. Doyle, this call is being monitored. We're aware of the incident with the passenger in seat 2B. Show us the documentation he presented." Harris's hands trembled as he lifted Samuel's folder into view. The seal gleamed under the light. The executives whispered among themselves, muted but visible. Then a woman with a clipped tone spoke. "Mr. Brooks, state your name and position for the record." Samuel lifted his gaze, calm as ever. "Samuel Brooks, Advisory Inspector, National Transportation Safety Board." The murmurs in the boardroom grew louder. One man whispered, not realizing his mic was live. "They pulled him back?" "After all these years?" Megan caught it too. She blurted out, "What does that mean? What is he to you?" Samuel leaned forward, his voice cutting across the distance. They already know who I am. Because before I was an inspector, I was theirs. The passengers stiffened. Phones zoomed in. Linda Park adjusted her glasses, watching intently. "Explain," she said quietly. Samuel's eyes didn't leave the boardroom screen. 20 years ago, I wrote the safety protocols this airline still uses today. Every checklist, every inspection standard, every safeguard meant to protect passengers and crew. My signature is in your manuals, your training binders, your flight certifications. The air drained from the cabin. The businessman in 1A muttered, "You're kidding me!" The couple in 2C gasped audibly. On the live stream, comments fired like gunshots. "He designed the system? This just went nuclear. Southwest is finished." The woman in the boardroom pressed her lips together. "Mr. Brooks, you no longer hold a position with this airline. You left under difficult circumstances. Why insert yourself now?" Samuel's tone sharpened. "I didn't leave. I was pushed out because I refused to sign off on shortcuts that put lives at risk. And now I return as the one person who knows exactly how your system can crumble, because I built it." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Maya's phone trembled in her hand as her stream caught every word. Tears still clung to her lashes, but awe lit her face. Megan shook her head furiously. "This is impossible. If he really created the safety system, why is he scrubbing toilets for a living?" Samuel turned his gaze on her, steady, unblinking. "Because the truth costs more than any salary. And sometimes, the only way to watch those who hide corruption is from the ground." The boardroom fell into tense silence. No one interrupted. They couldn't. Linda spoke softly but firmly. "So he's not just any inspector. He's the architect, the man who knows every weakness in your procedures. If he says this flight is unsafe, it carries the weight of your entire system collapsing." The grey-haired man finally spoke again, his voice grave. "Mr. Brooks, what is it you want?" Samuel's hand rested lightly on his watch. He glanced at the ticking second hand, then back at the screen. "I want accountability. For your captain, for your crew, for every corner you've cut since the day you buried the truth of my wife's death. Until that happens, this plane doesn't move an inch." The cabin erupted in murmurs, fear mixing with awe. Passengers who moments ago doubted him now stared as if he were the only thing standing between them and disaster. And the live stream blazed hotter than ever. The boardroom's image flickered on the screen, a wall of stone-faced executives staring back into the cabin. Their voices came faint, clipped, like they were speaking through clenched teeth. "Captain Harris," one of them said, "maintain order. We will handle this internally. Do not escalate further." Another chimed in, colder still. "This situation will not be discussed outside this aircraft. Silence is the best resolution." Passengers exchanged shocked looks. Phones shook in their hands. The live stream comments poured in like a tidal wave. "They're covering it up. They want him quiet." Samuel Brooks sat motionless, his eyes narrowing. He let the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of their words to poison the air. Then he spoke, his voice like a knife sliding clean through glass. "No, there is no justice in silence." The sentence hit harder than any accusation. Passengers shifted, phones zooming closer. Even the security officers paused, unsure. Samuel leaned forward, his hands resting on the briefcase that had already shattered the cabin's illusions. "You've buried enough truth. Buried my career. Buried my wife, buried the complaints of every passenger who dared to speak. But you will not bury this." The boardroom faces stiffened, some averting their eyes. But before they could respond, another voice rose, soft at first, trembling, but carrying more force than anyone expected. "I believe him. Head snapped toward the sound. Maya Thompson stood in the aisle, her hand still shaking as she clutched her phone. For the first time since the confrontation began, she wasn't whispering, wasn't hiding. Her voice cracked, but it carried. "I'm a flight attendant. I've worked under Megan Doyle for a year, and I saw everything with my own eyes." Megan spun around, eyes wide, fury igniting in her face. "Maya, sit down. That's an order." But Maya didn't move. Her voice rose stronger. "I watched her accuse him before he even spoke. I watched her dismiss the boarding pass, the card, every proof he showed. She said people like him don't belong here, and I knew it was wrong." Gasps filled the cabin. Phones swiveled, recording every word. Aiden's live stream jumped. 140,000 viewers now. Comments screaming, "A flight attendant just confirmed it." Megan's face drained of color. "You're lying. You're throwing your career away." Maya's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin. "Maybe. But better my career than my conscience." The words landed like a thunderclap. Samuel's gaze met hers. For the first time, the steel in his eyes softened. A flicker of gratitude passed between them, unspoken but undeniable. Linda Park stood too, her voice sharp. "There it is. A witness. Corporate. You cannot silence this anymore. It's live, it's public, and it's corroborated." The boardroom's silence was louder than any argument. Executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their polished composure cracking under the glare of 100 cameras. Captain Harris looked trapped, his authority shrinking with every second. "This is chaos," he muttered, but even his voice lacked conviction. Samuel straightened, his voice steady, almost solemn. "Chaos is the cost of truth when silence has reigned too long. But make no mistake, truth always wins." The passengers erupted, not with fear, but with applause. Hesitant at first, then louder, spilling down the rows. The sound of people choosing sides. And at the center of it, Samuel Brooks sat with the dignity of a man who had finally found his ally, and the storm that had carried him for years began to shift. The cabin light seemed harsher now, exposing every crack in authority. Phones captured every angle, and the pressure was unbearable. Linda Park stood in the aisle, her legal pad pressed firmly against her chest like a weapon, her voice carried with the sharpness of a courtroom. "Captain Harris, you've been accused of falsifying safety checks. Will you deny it now, on record, in front of 200,000 witnesses?" Gasps spread down the rows. Aiden's livestream counter blazed past the number, 200,000 and climbing. The comment stream was a flood of outrage and disbelief. "Say it, Captain. Deny it if you dare." Harris's lips parted, sweat dripping from his brow, his voice cracked. I don't have to answer that here." Linda's eyes narrowed. "That silence speaks volumes. Your refusal is an admission." The taller officer shifted uncomfortably, his hand falling away from his restraints. The passengers leaned closer, phones raised higher. The businessman in 1A whispered under his breath, "It's over for him." Then Linda turned sharply, her gaze slicing toward Megan Doyle. "And you, Ms. Doyle, do you deny telling this man," she pointed directly at Samuel, "that people like him don't belong in first class?" Megan froze, her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I never said." Linda cut her off, voice like a hammer. "Careful. Every phone in this cabin has you on video. Would you like me to play it back?" Passengers erupted in murmurs. Phones waved in the air, eager to catch her stumble. The live stream comments screamed, "She said it! We heard it! Play it back!" Megan's face turned chalk white. She stammered, her words tumbling out. "I didn't mean, it wasn't about race. I was under pressure. Repeat it," Linda pressed, her tone merciless. "Repeat what you said," Let the nation hear it again. Megan's shoulders slumped, her lips trembled, and the words spilled out, faint but unmistakable. People like him don't belong here. The cabin exploded. Gasps, curses, voices overlapping. Phones captured every frame, live stream comments in all caps. She admitted it. This is history in the making. Samuel remained silent, his hands folded, his old watch ticking. He didn't need to speak. The weight of her words crushed her more than anything he could say. Maya stood straighter, her voice trembling but loud enough for everyone. I was there. I heard it, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore. He told the truth. The passengers shifted again, momentum swinging completely to Samuel's side. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then stronger, defiant against the silence corporate tried to impose. Harris slammed a fist against the cockpit door, his voice breaking. This is a trial, not a flight. None of you understand the chain of command. Linda's reply was swift, her words sharp as steel. Command is meaningless when it's corrupt. You've lost control, Captain, and the entire nation just watched it happen. The boardroom feed flickered on the monitor again, executives pale and shaken, whispering frantically. Their silence was more damning than any defense. Aiden whispered into his phone, his face pale now. 200,000 live viewers. Every news outlet is covering this. This isn't a flight anymore. It's a reckoning. Phones buzzed with push alerts. Passengers read them aloud. Breaking news. Southwest under investigation. Federal Inspector grounds flight. Headlines spread faster than the plane could ever fly. Samuel finally looked up, his voice quiet but carrying. We're almost out of time. What happens next defines not just this flight, but this airline. The cabin fell into heavy silence, all eyes on him, as the final decision loomed like a storm cloud ready to break. The silence in the cabin was suffocating, every eye pinned on Samuel Brooks. His watch ticked faintly, each second slicing through the tension. Then his voice rose, low but resonant. You want to know why I disappeared? Why the man who built your safety system became invisible? Passengers leaned forward, phones trembling in their hands. The livestream count surged past 250,000, comments flashing like sparks. Samuel's gaze locked on the boardroom faces glowing across the monitor. Because years ago, you asked me to lie. A crash left 47 dead. Mechanical failure, preventable, and you wanted me to bury it under paperwork. Call it pilot error. Blame a man who couldn't defend himself. Gasps erupted. Someone in row 5 covered their mouth. The businessman in 1A muttered, My God! Samuel's eyes hardened. I refused. I would not trade lives for profit, so you traded mine instead. You stripped me of my title, blacklisted me, turned me into nothing. A janitor scrubbing your floors. The cabin went dead quiet. The truth hit harder than any accusation before. Megan's face, twisted in panic. He's lying! None of this is true. He's fabricating it to... But the boardroom didn't back her. The grey-haired chairman finally lowered his head, his voice grave. Mr. Brooks, we cannot deny what happened. It is true. The cabin gasped again. Phones caught every frame as executives shifted uncomfortably, shame etched into their faces. The live stream counter climbed, 270,000, 280, soaring toward 300,000. Comments screamed, he exposed them. They admitted it. History. Linda Park stepped forward, her voice sharp as a verdict. There it is. A confession. You silenced a man who refused to lie about death, and now the world sees you for what you are. Samuel remained seated, calm but fierce. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice, the same arrogance that cost me my wife, that killed 47 souls, just tried to play out again on this plane. But not this time. Not today. Captain Harris slammed his fist against the doorframe, desperate. He can't dictate this. He's not the captain. The boardroom cut him off. A woman's voice, stern and final. Captain Derek Harris, effective immediately. You are suspended from duty pending investigation. Hand over command, Harris's face drained of color. His authority, his career, stripped in seconds. He slumped against the cockpit door, broken. Phones caught it all. The live stream ticked past 300,000. Then all eyes swung to Megan. She stood frozen, trembling, her lips parted, but no words coming out. The chairman's voice was steel. Miss Doyle, your conduct has violated company policy and federal law. Consider this your final flight. Security will escort you upon landing. Megan's knees buckled. Please, I didn't mean... Her voice broke, drowned out by murmurs of passengers recording her fall. Samuel said nothing. He didn't need to. Maya wiped her eyes, whispering into her phone. This is justice. Her second livestream exploded with viewers, comments flooding. She's fired. He's suspended. The janitor won. Samuel finally looked back at the monitor, his voice calm, unshakable. Your silence ended 47 lives. My silence ended tonight, and the world has already decided who was right. Executives sat in silence, heads bowed, their shame broadcast across 300,000 screens. The balance of power had shifted completely. The invisible janitor was invisible no more. The cabin was silent, except for the relentless buzzing of phones and the faint tick of Samuel Brooks's old watch. Corporate had crumbled. Harris was suspended. Megan was finished. Yet Samuel didn't stand in triumph. He didn't bask in the flood of cameras aimed at him. Instead, he turned slowly toward Maya. Her phone was still raised, streaming live to thousands, but her hands trembled. Tears blurred her vision. Samuel's voice softened, low enough that it drew everyone closer. Don't let this end with me. Tell them what you saw. Tell them the truth. People your age, they need to know justice isn't theory. It lives here, in the choices we make. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She nodded quickly, clutching her phone tighter. I will. I swear I will. The passengers erupted in applause, not for victory, but for courage. The sound filled the cabin, vibrating through the walls. But amid the clapping, Captain Harris slumped in his seat near the cockpit door, his face buried in his hands. For the first time, the weight of everything broke him. His voice cracked through the noise. I have a son. The applause died instantly. All eyes turned toward him. His shoulders shook as he lifted his head, eyes red with tears. He's mixed race, half black, and tonight I realized I've treated men who look like him as threats, as less than. God help me. The words slammed into the cabin harder than any revelation before. Even Megan, still trembling, froze in place. Samuel studied him for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he spoke, steady and unyielding. Then don't waste these tears, Captain. Teach your son better than you were taught. Let him see a world where dignity isn't questioned by the color of his skin. Harris broke completely, sobbing into his hands. Passengers shifted, stunned, witnessing not just the fall of a captain, but the fracture of a father's pride. Maya lowered her phone for the first time, her voice soft. This isn't just about planes anymore. This is about us. Samuel eased back into seat 2B, his briefcase closed, his documents resting neatly inside. The phone still pointed toward him, waiting for another speech, another twist. But he only adjusted his watch, its worn silver catching the cabin light. His gaze drifted toward the window, where the night sky stretched endlessly, indifferent to the storm that had just raged inside the cabin. He spoke one last time, his voice clear, resonant, carrying into every phone, every stream, every heart. Justice doesn't need glory. It only needs the truth. The cabin fell into a reverent hush. Even the faint hum of the engines seemed to bow to the words. The camera phones captured the image. Samuel Brooks, the janitor they tried to erase, seated quietly with his old watch ticking steadily on his wrist. No spotlight, no applause, just the truth, unshakable. And in that silence, healing began, and the watch ticked on. Before we close this journey, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from tonight? Maybe it's the start of your morning with coffee in hand, or perhaps it's the quiet hours of midnight where stories like this find you. Share your place, your moment, down in the comments. We truly read everyone with gratitude. And if this story of Samuel Brooks, the man the world tried to overlook, touched you in some way, consider subscribing, not just to hear more stories like this, but to stand with a community that still believes in dignity, compassion, and the courage to face injustice. Thank you for giving us your time today. Wherever you are, carry this story with you, because sometimes justice isn't loud, it doesn't arrive with fanfare. It waits quietly until someone chooses to speak. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in the next story.